Have you ever stopped just for a second to think about some of the big divisions we just accept? Like the idea that there's this fundamental split between Islam and the West.
Yeah, it's everywhere, isn't it? Headlines, history books.
Exactly. It feels like it's always been that way.
Yeah.
Like some, I don't know, unchanging fact about the world. But what if it's not real? Not in the way we think. What if it's actually been, constructed, built up maybe to shape how we see things?
It's a really powerful question. And it's right at the heart of Hamid Dabashi's book, The End of Two Illusions, Islam After the West.
Right.
He basically argues we need to get ourselves out from under this illusion, and others like it. These binaries, they cloud our thinking.
Okay, so that's what we're doing today. This is our deep dive into Dabashi's argument. And we're not just reading Dabashi.
No, definitely not. We're bringing in other voices, too. People like Ilan Pape, Walter Mignolo, Deepak Kumar.
Because they also see this Islam versus West thing as, what did Pape call it? A gnosiological invention.
Yeah, basically a manufactured way of knowing the world, not something natural.
So we'll look at the history behind it. Some surprising history, actually. The philosophy, the culture, all the things that kind of reveal the cracks in this illusion.
It's really about peeling back those layers, isn't it? To see how these terms got their power and maybe how they mislead us.
Okay, let's unpack the main illusion first. Dabashi starts with something that sounds almost too simple. He says, look, Islam is a religion. The West is, well, it's a place, a geographical thing.
Apples and oranges.
Exactly, apples and oranges. How can you possibly set them up as these direct opposites? This bizarre binary opposition, as he calls it. That was his starting point.
And from there, he gets into this really interesting idea about the West itself. He calls it a fetishized commodity.
Okay, fetishized commodity. That immediately makes me think of Marx.
You got it. He's directly drawing on Marx's idea of commodity fetishism.
Remind us how that works again.
Well, Marx said you take something basic like a wooden table, just wood and labor, but turn it into a commodity, something to be bought and sold.
And suddenly it's more than just a table.
Right. It takes on this almost mystical quality, this transcendent value that seems separate from the work that went into it. It develops grotesque ideas, Marx said.
So Dabashi is saying the West has become like that, this kind of abstract, almost holy concept that hides the real economic and power stuff underneath.
Precisely. It stops being just a geographical area and becomes this thing we believe in, which masks capital, masks power relations.
And doesn't he also bring in Freud to explain how we get hooked on these illusions?
He does, yeah. Thinking more broadly, Freud's idea of an illusion is basically a belief driven by our wishes.
Something we want to be true.
Exactly. Whether it matches reality or not is kind of secondary. So Dabashi points to this idea of fundamental Western superiority as that kind of illusion. It's rooted in wish fulfillment, he argues, not in, objective fact.
Okay, so if they are illusions, how do they get built? Let's talk about manufacturing the divide, starting with the West.
Right.
And this might surprise you, but one of the key origin stories often told the Battle of Poitiers back in 732 AD.
Big famous battle.
Well, according to Dabashi and historians he cites, it was actually pretty insignificant at the time.
Yeah, an entirely insignificant battle. It didn't mean much to either side, really.
But then, centuries later,
it gets rediscovered. European historians, thinkers like Voltaire, Edward Gibbon, they start writing about it, imagining this huge turning point.
Like, what if Europe had become Muslim? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Scenarios of the Quran being taught at Oxford.
They basically inflated it, romanticized it, made it into this pivotal moment that supposedly saved Europe, saved the West.
And once it's romanticized like that, it gets weaponized.
Absolutely. That small battle becomes, as Dabashi puts it, an iconic feature of a secular sacred pantheon of fascistic imagination.
Wow. And you see that popping up even today, right?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Figures like Anders Breivik in Norway. You have groups like the Charles Martel Society in the U.S., Richard Spencer. They all invoke Poitiers.
Using it to prop up white supremacist ideas.
Right.
It's disturbing how history can be twisted like that.
So what's underneath all this? What's the sort of philosophical engine driving the invention of the West?
Good question. Dabashi argues it was fundamentally based on a Hegelian philosophy of history.
Okay, Hegel. So history moving towards a specific goal.
Exactly, a teleological view. History wasn't just happening, it was marching purposefully towards the West as its ultimate destination, its historical Geist or spirit.
Which conveniently pushes everyone else off the main stage.
Right. Major empires like the Sassanids in Persia, kind of sidelined. And it helps solidify Islam, not just as different, but as this eternal enemy standing in the way of history's grand plan.
It's a way of writing the script, so you're always the hero.
And Immanuel Kant's philosophy played a part too, didn't it? In a different way.
Yeah, Kant's contribution, according to this analysis, was making the European bourgeois subject, basically, the educated, middle-class white man, the universal standard.
The default human.
Pretty much. His experience, his way of thinking becomes the norm. Everyone else, all the non-Western experiences, they're seen as deviations, aberrations, not capable of being the knowing subject in the same way.
So philosophy itself, the ability to think rationally, gets kind of merged with the idea of the West.
It becomes coterminous with the West, as Dabashi says. And this even ties into religion, but maybe not how you'd first think.
How so?
Well, Whitney Abernathy, a scholar Dabashi cites, looked at colonial contexts, like French Morocco. She noticed Christianity wasn't just acting as a religion there.
It was doing something else.
It became a vehicle for civilizational conquest, but it did this by branding itself as secular.
Secular Christianity.
Kind of hiding its religious identity to promote itself as universal. So universalism and Christianity merged, and then that whole package got labeled the West. It's a clever way to claim universality while imposing a specific viewpoint.
Okay, that's a really complex picture of how the West as an idea was constructed. So what about the other side of this supposed binary? How did Islam get shaped into a kind of political abstraction?
Dabashi argues that the creation of Islamism, whether seen as moderate or militant, was largely a political project born out of the colonial experience. It happened with colonial modernity.
So it was a reaction.
In large part, yes. Under the pressure of colonialism, Muslim thinkers and leaders aggressively unsheathed the political power of their religion. It became a tool, a weapon, to fight back against colonial rule.
But Dabashi says that came at a cost.
A huge cost. He looks at figures like Al-Tatawi, Al-Afghani, Rashid Rida, Ali Abdal Razik people trying to grapple with European modernity, either by accommodating it or resisting it.
And in doing that,
they ended up, in Dabashi's view, moral imagination? Meaning Islam, which is this incredibly rich, diverse, historically complex tradition, got flattened. It became, as he puts it, a monolithic echo of Muslim political failures, reduced to a kind of radically reactive ideology, losing much of its internal depth.
Wow. So the very act of resisting the West paradoxically reshaped Islam in a way that fit the binary.
That's a key part of his argument, yes. And we see the fallout even now. Think about the U.S. wars in Afghanistan and Iraq.
Yeah.
Dabashi frames them as ideological wars against an abstraction codenamed Islam, and launched from what he calls an even more vacuous abstraction called the West.
It's abstract fighting abstract.
Pretty much. And you saw how during that period, anti-Muslim sentiment, even outright hatred, became much more mainstream, almost normalized. The Stephen Miller emails leak later highlighted how official some of that thinking became.
Which leads us to this idea of the monologue of civilizations, where real conversation just stops.
Exactly. There's no dialogue possible in that framework.
And this is where Samuel Huntington's famous Clash of Civilizations thesis comes in, right?
Mm-hmm. The idea that future conflicts would be between civilizations, primarily Islam, and the West.
But Dabashi reads Huntington very differently. He doesn't think it was really about predicting global conflict at all.
No, he argues it was much more domestic. It was a major reactionary backlash against big shifts happening inside the United States.
Like what kind of shifts?
Think about large-scale immigration. He mentions Asian and Latino immigration specifically, and the rise of multiculturalism as a concept, as a political force.
So people feeling like their traditional idea of America or the West was changing.
Precisely. These self-appointed custodians of Western civilization felt alarmed. It's this weird paradox. They declare the West victorious, after the Cold War.
But at the same time,
it's suddenly in dire need of protection from its internal enemies, the poor and colored enemies, as Dabashi characterizes their view.
So the Clash of Civilizations wasn't an attempt to understand the world, but more like drawing lines in the sand at home.
That's Dabashi's take. He says figures like Huntington or Bernard Lewis, who had similar ideas, they weren't actually interested in dialogue, not at all.
What were they interested in then?
Absolutist domination, a triumphant declaration of the victory of the West over the rest. It wasn't a conversation. It was, in Dabashi's words, a soliloquy of power.
Just talking to yourself, declaring victory.
Yeah. No room for anyone else's perspective. It shuts down any possibility of real exchange.
Okay, so if these illusions are so powerful and so damaging, how do we start to take them apart? How do we move beyond this binary? Dabashi offers some ways forward, right?
He does. One key area he explores is gendering the difference, specifically through what he calls feminism without borders.
Feminism without borders. What does that mean in this context?
It means looking at the work of critical feminists like Chandra Talpade Mohanty, who really pushed feminism beyond its often Eurocentric roots.
Decolonizing it.
Exactly. Making it face its own historic blind spots about race, class, empire. This kind of feminism doesn't separate Islam and the West. It critically connects them, looking at women's lives across these supposed divides.
And Dabashi uses some amazing historical examples here, doesn't he? Women who just lived across these lines.
Oh, absolutely. Really fascinating figures. He mentions the Mughal Empress Queen Nurhan, incredibly powerful.
Lady Mary Montagu.
Right. The English aristocrat in Ottoman Turkey who saw smallpox inoculation and brought the idea back west. Qurrat Alain, the 19th century Persian poet and Bobby figure who was so radical for her time.
And others too, like Inji Aflatun, Taj al-Sultana, Rosa Luxemburg.
Yeah.
Even someone like Gertrude Bell, the British colonial officer, engaging deeply with Persian poetry.
Their actual lives, their actions, their intellectual connections, they just make that imagined barrier between East and West look completely illusory and porous. It didn't hold them back.
He also mentions a film, The Day I Became a Woman.
Yes, by Marzi Meshkini. An Iranian film in 3 parts following a girl, a young woman, and an old woman.
And what's the significance there?
Dabashi sees it as this powerful visual allegory. The women move from being symbols metaphoric of something else, representing tradition or the nation or whatever,
To becoming
metamorphic unto itself. They stop representing external ideas and start embodying their own moral imagination, aesthetic possibilities, existential autonomies. It visually shows the collapse of those imposed limiting expectations, particularly on Muslim women.
Okay, so that's gendering the difference. What's the next pathway? Deracing civilizations.
Right. This involves exposing how the concept of civilization, especially Western civilization, often functions as a code word, a dog whistle, for racial hierarchies.
He brings up that controversy involving U.S. Representative Steve King.
Yeah, King asked rhetorically, why was he taught about the merits of our history and our civilization, implying its obvious superiority?
And scholars pushed back hard.
They did, arguing that invoking Western civilization in that way is often a way to signal white supremacy without saying it outright.
Because historically, the idea was
civilization was Western, barbarity Eastern, Southern, global. That was the underlying equation.
And Dabashi argues this actually creates an unexpected connection.
An inadvertent link, he calls it, between the minorities who feel marginalized within the West and the majorities in the rest of the world who were brutalized by colonialism. They're all positioned as outside that dominant definition of civilization.
He uses Columbia University's core curriculum as a kind of case study for this, right?
Yeah, it's a great example. He shows how changes in the student body, the dynamically changing demography, and the introduction of thinking about race, gender, and class have forced that traditional Western civ model to be questioned and revised.
How does a course like critical theory, a global perspective, fit in?
That course explicitly tries to bridge these divides. It connects traumas often seen as uniquely Western, like the Holocaust, with the global traumas inflicted by European colonialism. It's an attempt, Dabashi says, at the undoing of Western civilization as this exclusive, racially coded idea.
Okay, and the third pathway, nations beyond borders. This sounds like it's about finding connections where we've been told there are none.
Precisely. It's about uncovering the hidden threads, the interconnected cultural fabric that just completely ignores the Islam-West binary.
And he finds these threads in some really surprising places in American culture.
Definitely. Like John Coltrane, the jazz legend.
Coltrane, what's the connection?
His album, A Love Supreme. Dabashi points out that Coltrane's chanted phrase, all praise belongs to God no matter what, has the exact meaning, the semantics of Al-Fatiha.
The opening chapter of the Quran, the one Muslims recite daily.
The very same. And the common interpretation of Allahu Akbar as Allah Supreme. Well, you can hear that resonating with A Love Supreme.
Yep.
It's this deep, maybe subconscious Islamic influence and a cornerstone of American music.
That's incredible. And Toni Morrison, too.
Yes. In her novel Song of Solomon, Dabashi finds what he calls bashful allusions to Islamic citations and African Muslim traces.
Like the Flying Africans motif.
Yes, and specific names, Muhammad, Medina. He suggests that Sufi Islam, which came over with enslaved Africans, didn't just disappear, it merged with other practices like voodoo, offering spiritual strength.
So these aren't obvious references, but
They're faded out, metamorphosed, palimpsestic, uncertain maybe, but for Dabashi, that makes the power of Muslim memory in African-American experiences even stronger, even more palpable. It's woven in deep.
so what's the takeaway from all these examples?
It's that we need to recollect and to retrain our historical memory. We need to look beyond the standard narratives.
Like looking at older maps.
Exactly. Ancient maps, Babylonian, Assyrian, Persian, they show a world before the Middle East was carved up by colonial powers. A world where Persia, China, India weren't just out there, but were integral to how Europeans even understood themselves. They offered different ways of seeing the world, alternative topographies of knowledge, sentiments, and culture.
So wrapping this up then, the core message from Dabashi is that this whole Islam in the West binary, it's just not true.
It's a powerful illusion, yes. One that, as he says, doesn't represent, but in fact conceals the truth.
And maybe big global events like the pandemic actually help expose that.
He thinks so. The pandemic showed the world for the shrinking and endangered village that it is. Suddenly, those big civilizational divides seemed pretty irrelevant when everyone was facing the same threat.
So the way forward isn't reinforcing those divides, but
embracing dialogical thinking, real conversation, within Muslim communities, between Muslim and non-Muslim communities, across lines of race, gender, ethnicity, including minorities. It's about, as he puts it, collective resistance to predatory empires and in the joyous celebration of life.
And he connects this directly to ongoing conflicts, doesn't he? Particularly Israel-Palestine.
Yes, he sees that conflict as a place where this exposed delusion of Islam and the West continues to flex its atrophied muscles. It's where the illusion still has dangerous power.
And he makes a pretty provocative claim about the origins of various ideologies in the region.
He does. He argues that things we might see as opposed to, like, say, Wahhabism in Saudi Arabia, certain forms of Shuzism in Iran, Kemalist secularism in Turkey, and Zionism in Palestine are actually, in his view, all identical ideological byproducts of European colonialism, shaped by that same encounter.
Wow. Okay. So here's a final thought, the provocative idea to leave everyone with, drawing from Dabashi's analysis. He suggests that movements like Black Lives Matter and the Palestinian cause aren't separate issues. They're mutually illuminating.
Yeah. Challenging us to think about freedom universally. If, as the saying goes, no one is free until African Americans are free.
Then maybe, Dabashi implies, it's also true that no one is free unless Palestinians are free.
Yeah.
Unpacking these illusions shows us just how deeply interconnected all these struggles really are.